All right, so welcome back. We are finishing up goal 6 today, and I didn't plug in. Let me get my touch controls here. Come on, come on. There we go. All right, finish up goal 6. We're talking about registers, which we'll be making out of D flip-flops. Yes, I'm telling y'all, I think the name should be swapped. But yeah, D flip-flops. Because really the flip-flops are harder to change values on. Like they don't change values easily. So it feels like the one that's easy to switch values back and forth easily should be called the flip-flop. And the one that locks it into place better should be called the latch, but it's reversed. So I'm always, even after teaching this for 6-7 years now, I'm still calling them by the wrong name most of the time. I have to stop and think, oh, it's the opposite of that name. Either way, we'll be doing registers today, which will be really, it'll be one of the most common circuits in our computer, and it'll be our first one that really stores values and hangs on to them. I apologize, today is a coffee day, so hopefully I can talk in full sentences. All right, but first, let's review. What's an RS latch used for?
It's used for storing a bit.
Yeah, so it stores the value of a bit. Okay? So it stores the value of a bit. It doesn't necessarily change the value just because you change the inputs. Very particular set of input changes that change the value. What do the R and S stand for? Line already gave that away. But anybody here remember? What's the R and the S stand for? Set and reset. Good. And what state is illegal for an RS latch? All zeros. Okay, ones means it's locked into place. Okay, so RS latches at zeros, that is an invalid state. I should say invalid for. So what is the default state? RS latch is a 1-1. That's the default state. That's what it's in when it's locked into place and our value is being stored, when they're both ones. Okay, so what happens when you flip R to 0 and then back to 1? What happens to the value stored, to the Q output? Not necessarily flip-flop. If it's already at the value, then it won't change it. But what will Q be once you've done this? What does the reset it to? One more choice. It's 50-50 shot, either 1 or 0. So 0. Reset resets the Q to 0. And of course, Q naught's always going to be the opposite. We don't always need Q naught, but it's a freebie, so sometimes we have it on there. It can be used, and we will use it for our up counter. So S, when we flip S to 0 and back up to 1, that sets it to the output to 1. Okay, so remember the R, when we flip it down to 0, back up, that's what we do in order to change the value of the output for an RS latch. We either the S or the R go to 0 and back up again, because we don't want them both to be 0. We want them when they're both 1, they're locked into place. When you flip 1 down to 0 and back up, that changes the value. Or it may keep the value the same if it's already that value. R, when you flip that down, we're going to have an output of 0. S, when we flip that down and back up, the output's going to be 1. Okay? Good. All right, so today we're going to talk about registers. Here's our motivation. We use them everywhere. There's a bunch of registers here. We have these registers connected to the ALU. ALU being our arithmetic logic unit, which we'll get to that in a few weeks, that has arithmetic operations and logical operations like and, or, not. Arithmetic like and, adding, subtracting. So that basically, the ALU is where data goes to be manipulated. Okay? It's where the data goes to be manipulated. So these are our operands. So if we have an addition operation going on, our operands go into these two registers. They go into the ALU. They get manipulated, and then the result outputs comes around on this bus and gets stored back into a register. Okay? So now normally you have a lot more registers than this. When we go to assembly, you will be talking about all the different types of registers we'll be able to use. Most computers have more than just 2 registers for data because we'd have to be constantly loading data from memory otherwise, or the cache, and that is slow. So usually you want in a CPU as many registers as can reasonably be fit. But they're expensive and they take up space, so we are limited. You can't just throw registers at the problem and hope that'll solve it. Okay, but we do have it when we do assembly. We'll be talking about a MIPS computer, and it has 32 general purpose registers. Okay, but then there's some special registers. Here we have the memory address register. Okay, so our memory chip is accessed line by line. Each line of memory is 8 bits. Even in all modern computers, every byte of memory has an address. It's like every byte of memory is a single-family residence. Okay, when the mailman comes to deliver the mail, every house has a mailbox. Every house has an address, and then it's not like a big apartment complex where the mailbox is all in one place. Each one has its individual mailbox. So each line of memory has an address, and what's stored in this register will cause the memory chip to access that particular line, either to read from that line or to write to that line. Okay, this instruction register keeps track of the current instruction that is being run. So it stores the memory address register activates a line of memory, and then the instruction then can be stored in the instruction register, and that's the instruction that's being run. Okay, so that's a special register, the IR register. Actually, I'm probably getting ahead of myself. I probably have slides for that, by the way. And the last one here is our program counter. It's a special type of register that's an up counter. So every time we increment PCG here, that counts it up by 1. Okay, and its job is to keep track of the memory address of the next instruction to run. So when we run an instruction, the first thing that happens is the memory address that's stored in the PC goes onto the bus and gets loaded into the MA, the memory address register, so that it can then access that memory chip to grab the instruction that needs to be run, which then gets stored in the instruction register so that it can run. And then this gets incremented, it counts up. But also it has a load control point, because if we're doing a for loop or an if statement or any kind of jump or branch instruction where we're not running the next instruction, like a function call or something, then we can load a memory address that we actually want to go to next into it too. So it's an up counter with parallel load, and we'll be building that in a couple weeks. But registers are all over. They're all over our computer, and we try to put as many of them in as possible whenever you're designing a CPU. Okay? I probably have a lot of this already here. Yeah. Yep. Instruction register, talked about that. Memory address register, program counter, and then our general use registers are attached to the ALU. Okay, notice that we have this nice thick yellow line here. Okay, that is the bus. Notice that we have a lot of things outputting onto the bus, but we can't have them all writing to the bus at the same time. That's what we'll learn about these tri-state buffers here later. I think pretty quickly here, actually. This today or next week, I can't remember. But they control which thing gets to put data on the bus. But then, notice the bus is also attached to all the registers. So the registers can load values that are on the bus. Okay? So what's the problem with this? Yeah, so if we get register going through the ALU, gets manipulated, goes on the bus, and the output goes on the bus. But what's the problem? If we use our D-Latches that we built before, as long as G is high, then the value stored changes based upon D, right? As long as G, remember that from our D-Latches we built on Tuesday? As long as G is high, then if the data input changes, then what's being stored changes. So if the output of the ALU is going onto this bus and is attached to the input of the registers, then if we built these out of D-Latches, then as the ALU is manipulating the data and putting that new data on the bus, it would update the ALU, which would then change the results from, updating the register, which would then change the results of the ALU, right? because the G is going to stay high on these registers for a whole half cycle of the clock. And during that time, as the ALU manipulates the data, puts it on the bus, that's going to update the registers, and that's going to update the results. You'll just get the cycle of constantly changing data. So it's pretty obvious then we cannot use D-latches to build our registers. We need a different circuit. Yep, that's what I said. Why do you keep repeating me? So we need an output that is stable even while the input changes. Like I don't want it to constantly be able to update. What I need is a circuit that only updates at a single moment in time. It'll just grab it at a certain point, and that's it. That way, maybe when at the moment the clock goes high, at that exact moment, it'll grab the value that's on the line, and that's when it updates, and only then. Okay, that would work well for a register. And that is what our D flip-flop is. As I said, the name should have reversed. Yeah, enter the D flip-flop. All right, so here's the difference between the two. On our D-latch, it's level triggered. So the Q, which is our output, changes to match whatever D is, as long as G is 1. So for the whole time that G is 1, it changes. Q will update. As long as G stays high, Q will continually update to change to be whatever D is. So D can change all over the place. Okay? And then as the input changes, output will then change throughout the clock cycle because our G is going to stay high for half of the clock cycle. Okay? And so it can constantly be updating. But D flip-flops are edge triggered. That means they only change when a value changes. They're changed based at that one moment when another value changes. It's on the rising edge of G. And so it only changes at that certain point in time. And all the rest of the cycle, while the clock is high, the clock is low, that whole cycle, the rest of the time, the output does not change. Okay, it's only at that one moment when the clock goes high, when G goes high, that's the time it changes. Here's what she looks like. We'll go through some details on it in a minute. Okay, so our Q and Q naught, and again, I'm putting a clock here just so we can see it changing over time. You don't need a clock in your circuit. Do you need a clock in your circuit? No. Okay, don't need a clock here. It's just so I can see time changing. Okay, so Q and Q naught will only change on the rising edge, and the value of D is locked into the memory until until the G goes high again. So if we look at, so here is G. You see D changing a lot, but Q is not changing. It's staying the same until right here. Well, what happens right here? Well, that's the moment that G goes high. And even while G is high, even though D changes, you'll see that Q and Q naught are not changing. They aren't changing. They refuse to change. I don't hate saying not changing. Okay. So anyway, they don't change. Whether G is low, you see D is changing all this time while G is low, but they don't change. As soon as Q goes high, it changes. But even while G is high, even with D changing, the output is not changing. It stays steady. So a D-latch is like a hyper puppy, and a D flip-flop is like an old golden retriever. Okay, it stays calm until something triggers it, and then it can jump into form. A D latches, they go all over the place. D latches are the puppy that whenever there's somebody driving past the door, they're barking their heads off. Okay, but the D flip-flop, it only barks when somebody's actually pulling in the driveway. Okay? So here's what the function table looks like. We got this arrow. This is saying it's the rising edge. When G is going high, going from 0 to 1, and then this is when it's not that rising edge. So what this is saying is that when it's not a rising edge, it doesn't matter what D is. It's just going to be It's not going to change values. It's going to be whatever the previous value was. Okay, but when we hit the rising edge, if D is 1, the output becomes 1. If D is 0, the output becomes 0. Assuming, or stays the same if it already is that value. Okay? And we do, again, have Q and Q naught. And again, we mostly have that because the Q naught's free. It's already there. We need it because we still have these cross-connected inputs to outputs, outputs to inputs. Okay? So you'll notice our RS latch is still here. We still have the ye old RS latch that we have in both of those. That's still the same basic circuit that we had on Tuesday. It's just we have a lot more complicated of a wall in front of it. Okay? So you can think of the D-Latch like a guard letting people through. As long as the guard is there, he's going to let people through. But the flip-flop is like a door. When that door is shut, nobody's coming through. The only time people come in is when we'll open it for a brief second, let them in, and then close it. Okay? All right, so let's look. There's all the math behind it. Again, we're not going to worry about that. It's there if you want to look at it, but I don't want to more worry about it. Let's walk through the process. I have my color-coded version of it here again. You'll see that D is a 1, G is 0. Okay? So let's start modifying this. So notice I put D to 0. G is still 0. So what happens when D is 0? Well, now I have a 0 on this NAND gate, and so since they're not both 1s, this becomes a 1. Okay? But now both of those are 1, so now this output becomes 0. Well, this already has a 0 on it. So nothing else. So notice this G is protecting the two NAND gates that allow the RS latch to change. Okay? It's protecting those two NAND gates. So as long as this is 0, then those will always be 1. Right? So as long as G is 0, the R and the S will always be 1. It can't change. So what happens, so now this D is different than my Q. So now, when G goes high, what happens? Well, you notice this is a 3 NAND gate. This is a 2. Well, now this 3 NAND gate is all 1s, so my output becomes 0, which is the same as D. Okay, so that becomes 0, which means that Q naught becomes 1. Now those are both 1, and my Q becomes 0. Just like on the previous one. That all changes just like the same, like the previous. Okay, all right, so now D goes back to 1, which means now, which isn't going to change anything because there's already a 0 on there, so that's not going to change anything. What did I do? Okay, I went too far. Let me back up. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That goes back. Okay, yeah, so then when I put, I missed the G changing. Yeah. Yeah, so D changes to 0. D changes from 0 to 1, nothing changes because that's already a 0. So we already have a 1 coming out. But now when I put G back to 0, now there's a 0 on this line, so the R turns back to a 1, which makes these both 1, which makes that a 0, which makes that a 1 now. Okay, but now we're stopped. Okay? So that locks it into place. So you can see what really happens is what D is either sets this one up to be all reds or sets this one up to be both reds whenever G turns to 1. Okay, so D gets one of these ready to turn to red. I mean, to output black. It gets one of them with all but the G going to be red. So if right now you see this one is red, so that when G goes high, it's obviously going to change that S to 0. Whereas before, when D was 0, then this is red. Oh, I accidentally moved it forward again. I don't know how to do that on purpose. So when this is 0, that's got a 0 on it. But notice that when one of these does change, like when this R changes, it cross connects over there to keep anything from updating again. See, this R keeps this from changing and updating things. Okay, so let's change this back to 1. Now those are both 1. S turns to 0, which means we get an output of a 1, which switches the Q naught. And then, now it doesn't matter if I were to change, am I going to do that here? No, even if I change D to 0 here, I should show this example. If I turn D to 0 here, this will turn red. Something's not right. Turn that 0. That gets that back red, locks it into place. There's some connection missing here. I see this seems to be connected down here, but I'm just realizing now, after all the semester teachings, there's some connection here that is not right. So I will figure that out, and I will fix that. Because there's one of there should be a connection here somewhere. I think to the S. I think this is connected here. It's supposed to be connected here so that when that turns black, that will protect those two values. That's why there's 2 here. It protects it either with this as being black or this being black. I think that's supposed to be connected there. I'll have to double check. I think that would protect it. Okay, but yeah, because there's a connection from the R back to either this one or these to make sure that when one of these is black, it basically locks it into place. As long as one of those is black, as long as one of those is 0, it locks it into place. I'm 95% sure that's supposed to have it, but we'll look at the actual. Oh, over here. Yep. It is connected there. Those letters are reversed. This should be S, that should be R. How did I do that? Yeah, this should be the S, that should be the R. The letters are reversed. How can I be teaching this so long and I don't even notice that? Okay, so anyway, yeah, this wire should be connected so that when S changes, this connects, this blocks this from changing. Because when that's 0, it'll make that red. Yeah, so that R and S in that circuit is switched. When I get that up on LogicWorks, it'll be interesting to see which one of those is right, but I'm pretty sure I have those switched. So when D is 0, G going from 0 to 1 makes R 0. It resets the RS latch to 0. When G goes from 1 back to 0, it locks it into place. Not that you could change it anyway. When D is 1, when G goes from 0 to 1, S is set to 0, which sets the latch. And G going back from 1 to 0, it's locked. Okay, so here's the table. Again, we have some impossibles because it's set up so R and S never can be 0. These ones are impossible. So you can see here, it's like what are R and S going to turn to? So if G and D are both 0, that means and if this was where we're at 0, 1, that means G must have been a 1. So we went back to 0, so that locks it into place. Same here, but in reverse. That means D, G must have been 1 at some point. It's been a 1, and D must have been a 1. I must have switched it back to 0 before at this last one setting G to 0 in order to lock it into place. So this one, I've obviously been flipping D back and forth a little bit so that D was at 1. It's back at 0. It was at 1 when G went high. It's now back at 0, and at this point, I set G back to 0, which would set the latch into place. In here, this is probably D must have been 1, but G was 0, so it was already locked in place, so it doesn't change. And so here, if this is 0, 1, and this was 0, 1, it's because G was 1, and I flipped it back to 0, locked it in place. And here's a similar situation to this one, where I must have, when G went high, it must have been that this was 0. So at some point, I flipped it up to 1 before I put G back to 0, and it locked it into place. And this one, I must have just been flipping D, and flipped D up to 1 from 0, and that didn't change anything. Okay? And then this is the same as this one, but reverse, where I set everything, I'm setting it to 0, and D went high. It was already 0. It set it to 0. I must have just been flipping with D. And this one, it was 1, 0. And if yeah, so it was 1, 0, and so I must have just been flipping D, which didn't change anything. And then here it was 1, 1, so G must have just went high, and so that set it to 0. Okay, and when they both ended up being 1, then on this one I must have been messing with D because it didn't change. Same here, I must have been messing with D. Here, if it was 1, 1, then at this point I must have set G went from 0 to 1 because that set it to 1, 0. I know these tables are a little complicated because you have to kind of think about what was G and D previously to get to this G and D. If you don't understand the table, it's okay. Okay? It takes me a second each time to look at them too, but it's the table. It doesn't really matter if you understand it. They are a little complicated. But just how they work is you have to figure out what changed to get G and D to here, and based upon that change, we went from this to this on RNS. As long as you understand how the latches work, the circuits work, that's what matters. So this is going to be what you're going to be doing for the lab, is to have these flip-flops and these latches. Okay, and you're going to put them both on here. Okay, and you're going to see the difference of how they work. So we talked about Tuesday that the D-Latch, it changes. As long as G is high, then whatever happens to D, the output changes. So if you see here, if we look at the latch, we see when G goes high right here, when G goes high, the flip-flop changes, but we're not changing D until, wait, is G high? Yeah, no, G goes low here, and so changing D doesn't change anything, but as soon as it goes high again, they both change. But G stays high, and here you see D changes, but the only thing that changes is the D-Latch. The D flip-flop stays solid, which is again why I think the names should be switched. But the D flip-flop stays solid even with D changing while G's high. But you see that the D-Latch changes. Okay, then once G goes to 0, neither of them change, no matter what happens with D. But as soon as G goes high, they both update. Okay, let me get LogicWorks up. I want to verify that circuit again. I can't believe I've never noticed that. Let me get up. Here it is. Let's see, we're in goal 6. Here it is. Is this the same one? Yeah, this one. Go big. Oh my goodness. Yeah, the up arrow is kind of sticky. All right, so let me hit Control F so we can see the values on the line. So they're both 1. So G is high. If I flip D back and forth, wait, is G high? Yeah, G is high. Oh, it's being slow. Let me speed things up. No wonder. Speed things up. All right, so you'll see that the D-Latch is changing values down there. but the D flip-flop is not. When G goes to 0, and again, you don't need a clock. In fact, let me delete that. When G is 0, it doesn't matter what I do to D. Nothing changes. Okay, let's set D to be different from what the D flip-flop is. As soon as G goes high, the flip-flop updates, the latch updates, and now I can flip back and forth, and only the latch is updating. Okay, G goes back to 0, nothing changes. I'm going to set that to the opposite value of what my flip-flop is, and then set G high, and we see it changes. And then I can flip back and forth, only latch changes. That's the difference. Let's look inside this flip-flop real quick. Yeah, that's, and I don't have them labeled as R and S, but that should be S, this should be R. And this has the clear on it, which we're about to get into, how to do the clear. Okay, so that's the big difference. D flip-flops only change on the rising edge. But we need to be able to reset our flip-flops back to 0. When we start a program, we want all of our registers to be set to 0. And so we need a way to clear them back to 0. And so we're going to add a master clear. Well, the reset sets things to 0. So we kind of pull that R out here. Pull that R out here. It makes several changes. It basically, you see it attaches here to this one so that this R can go to 0. And then when that goes to 0, that'll reset. But it also attaches, remember, we're using these two. We're using this as a control, and this controls the D. This will control the S. So by being a 0 here, guarantees the S stays at 1, right? We guarantee the S stays at 1. By putting a 0 here, we're guaranteeing the output of this D stays at 1. So it makes sure that both the G and the D can't do anything. Okay? Now, I also did a manual S here, but that one, we're not actually going to have an output for that one. We're not going to have a port for that one. All we're worried about is the reset. We want to reset it. Okay, so that's going to be our master clear. So you notice I took off that S. We don't need the S. We only want to be able to reset. So I'm going to make that a clear port, and I'm going to reiterate, do not package your circuits with switches. Okay, this slide does have ports and switches. Take off the switches before you package. This is good for testing, but remove the switches before you package. Okay, so you don't have to worry about the extra circuits I put in here with the S on this one. Like I made this a 3 and this a 3. You don't need to worry about that. We just worried about the R. This is a circuit that you're going to make an exact copy of, but when you package, no switches, no clock. All right. That way, when clear is 1, then it's just a regular old flip-flop. Okay, because with all ones, that's the only time a 0 passes through. But when there's a 0, it's always a 1. So putting this to a 0 means we're going to be passing. No, a 0 means it's going to be a 1. That's right. Being a 1, it's not going to change anything. But being a 0 means that it's going to pass through a 0. Yeah, no, they all have to be 1 in order for it to pass. It's going to be a 1. I told y'all, there's a reason I got coffee today. I apologize, I'm tripping over myself. Okay, so putting clear to 0 means it's going to be stuck at 0. You got to put clear to 1 in order for it to work as a flip-flop. And we're going to have a master clear switch that we can flip that's connected to all of our registers, so that when we're ready to restart a program in our computer, we can just set that clear to 0 and it'll just reset all of our registers. And just for fun, as we get ready we'll make our up counter in our next week. Here's just a 1-bit up counter. So if you're counting with just a single, if you're counting in decimal with this, you only have one place value, you'd go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then reset to 0, right? 1, 2, 3, and you could just keep cycling around. Well, since we only have two values, a 1-bit counter will just go 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, right? So that's what this does. We take the Q naught we attach it back to the D so that when the clock goes high, it changes Q to be the opposite of what it currently is. Okay, so you see here, when the clock goes high, there's a bit of a delay, but then it switches values. Clock goes high, we switch values. Clock goes high, we switch values. That's a 1-bit up counter. And we're going to start with that and work our way up to higher bits next week. That won't work with the D-Latch, right? Because all this time that the clock is high, this would be going back and forth really quick. It only works with this because the output only changes at that one moment when G goes high. So how do we make a register? We just put a bunch of flip-flops together. Okay, again, I have switches and keyboards here, but when you package it, remove the switches, keyboards. So, and the nice thing is, the only thing that is that there's two things that are one port for all. The clear gets attached to all of them, and the G gets attached to all of them. But notice for this 4-bit register, we have separate data inputs, and we have separate outputs for each bit. And if you want more than 4 bits, you just keep stacking. Okay? And so the data comes in to D, and then when G goes high, all the flip-flops update at the same time, and then our output changes. Then we can do something fun like this. And again, this is just for fun, just to show off the powers of the flip-flop. Sounds like an interesting superhero theme. All right, so this is connecting a bunch of registers together, and it comes around to this multiplexer so that we're either grabbing the value from the last register and passing it through, or we can load a value in, right? Depending on what we set S to. Okay, we got all the clears connected so we can clear the values, but we also have this AND gate. Why do we have an AND gate? Well, when this is 0, the clock's not going to be able to pass through, so it's kind of like a switch to turn off the clock. Because when this switch is 0, the clock, this is going to be output 0, so the G is not going to be high. But then when I set this to 1, the output becomes whatever the clock is. It's like a control for the clock. All right, so I can set this to 0. I can turn, when you're doing this at home, turn your simulation down to be really slow. Because when you set this to 0, whatever is on your keyboard is going to get loaded into this register. Well, while the clock is 0, if you change the keyboard, then at the moment it goes high, we'll have 2 different values in the register. When it goes back to 0 again, change the keyboard, and then next time it goes high, we'll have 3 different values. Then you switch this to S to 1, and then it'll just start rotating values. Let me show you this. It's pretty fun. I know at least one student would tell me having this error. This comes up every once in a while. I don't know what causes it. It's never caused a problem, though. Just hit continue, and life is good. All right, so they all have C's in them. Let me hit Control F so we can see values in the line. We see this is changing. It doesn't look like anything's happening, so let's set this to 0. Let's slow down my simulation considerably. I'm gonna put let's switch that to 9. I'll set the clock high. 9 gets loaded. I set that back down to 0 again. So I got 9, a C, and a C. Let's pick another value. Let's say 6. I'm going to set this high. It gets loaded. I set that to 0. Now, when I set this to 0, now it's going to take the value, come around here, and it's going to start rotating. So now when I set that high, we just see the values rotate. Let's speed this up a little bit now. You see 6, 9, C, keep running. There's a little flash as all the registers are updating, but it just rotates around in a cycle. Okay, again, this only works because we're only updating at a single moment. And then even if the input changes, it's not going to change the output. You know, you may be like, Mr. Orem, what if I flip it really quick? Well, yeah, I think if you get it within that 1 nanosecond of it updating the gate, you might be able to get it to change twice. Okay, but that's normally not an issue. We're not flipping it every nanosecond. Okay? And so then it just rotates around, and that just shows the power of the flip-flop. Summer really needs to make a comic of that. All right. That's it. All right, so let's take a look at our lab. So I did get all the labs finished upgrading again on yesterday. I caught up all the grading on those. So you should have feedback. You know, that's the last lab for the assignment. There's something I wanted to say. People have been asking some questions about the assignment. A couple things. Oh yeah, here's what I wanted to say. When you're deciding how to write up, when I ask you to explain something, what I'm looking for is understanding. Okay, that you understand the circuit. Okay, so if you're not sure what I'm asking, just show, as long as you show that you understand what's going on with the circuit and why it's working and how it works, then you're fine. Okay, so I'm trying to see understanding that your circuit, you give enough examples of your circuit to show that it works, and you give an explanation that shows me you understand what's happening in the circuit, what's happening in the waveform, etc. Another question a lot of students tend to have is annotating the waveform. So over here, this is the waveform. So what you can do, when I say the annotate, you can either just, a lot of times it's like do multiple images of the slide, of the circuit with different output values. Oh, stop. No. Different output values, or show the waveform and annotate it. What I mean by that, so I'm going to take a screenshot. There's a snipping tool in Windows at least, and I've hit new, and if I'm going to grab this waveform here, making sure I grab all my values here in the gray, and then my timing there, and then what you'll want to do is you can mark this up, and I can say, I can put a time like 1. You're not going to let me do that, are you? All right, I can do like 1 here, 2, that's a 2. 3, and then in my explanation, they'll say, hey, at time 1, such and such happens because such and such. At time 3, such and such happens because I don't want you to say at time 26:20. I'm like, okay, 26. How many? There's between? There's 200 between there. So somewhere I don't want to have to look at that. I just want you to mark. Just put either letters or numbers or colors at different points that you're going to talk about in your description, and then refer back to that. Where I have marked in red, this is happening on the waveform. Where I've marked in blue, where I've put at A, at B, just to make it easy for me. There's 70 students in this class. These things take 10 to 15 minutes each to grade. Okay? At minimum. That's if you all do me good. Okay? So, and someone says, well, how much is enough? I try to tell students, more is better than less. Okay? Just as long as you have shown your understanding, you've put onto that paper your full understanding of the circuit, you've done enough. Okay. All right. So any questions on that? I know you all are anxiously, and also again, don't upload documents. Don't like write it out in Word or PDF and upload that PDF, because then I have to download it and open it. I want you to put your response directly into the text box there, please. And add whatever images, and then your text. And fortunately, it tends to auto-save, so that should be pretty safe. And don't do videos. I always have at least one student who submits a video in each box instead of text. I want text in this, in images. Okay? All right, so let's look at lab 8. Maybe. Go, Gadget, Google Docs. Make it that reference? Okay. Inspector Gadget's still cool. All right, so you've done the D-Latch. Package it. Here is our D flip-flop. And again, you're going to make this circuit. A lot of the circuits we make, it's a copy of mine. There's a few, especially as we get into more complicated ones, I'll do like maybe a 3-bit version. You have to make a 4-bit version, so you have to put a little work into it. But a lot of these are going to be exact copies. It is going to be the assignments where you show me you actually understand what they do. Eli, yes, you're going to do both images, like screenshots of your circuits or the waveform, and then text to describe it. So it's both images and text for most of them. Okay, so yeah, so a lot of these are going to be exact copies of what I do. Later we'll have some that you are going to have to put a little more thought into, but especially the earlier ones are pretty much exact copies. So you're going to make this, again, removing the switches, removing the clock when you package. Ask me why I keep repeating that. All right, so you package it, and then you set up just like I did and do a test. The clock is not necessary for the test. It'd be a little easier for debugging without the clock. Stop. I want you to. Anyway. And then you're going to make a 4-bit register, and you want to test it. Okay? And then you're going to set up just like I did and get a cycle going. Now, remember, Mitchell is asking at home if for lab 6 and 7 we use the CCTs you created. Yeah, all but lab 4, it's going to be the things you did for the lab are going to be in the assignment. So always just use the ones that you've already created. Okay, just remember when you're doing this one, slow down the simulation so you can get them loaded. And if there's an error there's an issue that happens with every once in a while. Someone can't slow down their simulation. Like it's either stopped or full speed. I don't know why. Some folks that happens to. It's usually one student in every semester that happens to. If that's you, as long as it updates with the new value, even if it goes zoot, it just fills up, then I know it's working. Okay? The spinning is really just for fun. So as long as it's updating with values, not doing some weird flashing of different values, then it worked. Okay? So if you can't slow it down enough, one thing you can do if yours won't let you slow down, you can set the clock to be like 100 high and 100 low, and that will essentially slow it down. Right-click on it, go to attributes, I think. You can set it to 100 and 100, and that'll slow it down. Yeah, then you build it, pack it. Then you'll need to build an 8-bit register. Just like the 4-bit, just need 8 flip-flops. Okay? And then for submission, unit 2 now. We're on goal 6. Lab 8. All right. Oh, nothing to go up to. All right, so I want to see the D flip-flop. I want to see this circuit here. Okay, first thing I ask for is this circuit. And then I want you to flip D back and forth a few times and leave it in a value where it's different than the Q for your flip-flop, so that I want to see the flip-flop update. And then I flip G to 1, and the flip-flop should change. And then while G is high, flip your D a couple of times so I can see that only the D-Latch changes. Okay? And then for 2, that is this circuit. I want to see this circuit. Whether you do it with the 4-bit register or 8-bit register, doesn't matter to me. Okay? We will need both 4-bit and 8-bit registers for our final computer, but as long as you do it with one of them, doesn't matter. I want to see the values cycling, and I just need to, please already have the values loaded, unless yours is going stupid fast, and you just have to show me it changing. However you have it loaded, just switch over to that, and I can see it rotate a couple times, and life is good. And then I want to see the 8-bit register because that's the big one. Set up. And then show values being loaded into the register, only on the rising edge of G. Okay? So this one's a little bit more than before, but should still be less than a minute. Okay? Questions on this? All right. Well, have at that. You should be able to get lab 8 done. I'm here if you have questions. We have about, 20 minutes left, a little over 20 minutes left. I can help you with this or with your assignment. Otherwise, I'll see you all back here.